Welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a great episode ahead for you guys. We're going to talk about a variety of topics, including Jeremy Irons and what a pervy wanker he is and how he shouldn't say anything about anything other than his acting. We'll also talk about partisan politics. Are we so obsessed with partisan politics that we're willing to support our party regardless of what they do? We're also going to talk about a member of Anonymous who played a very critical role in leaking information in the Steubenville, Ohio rape. He has identified himself and he could be facing 10 years in prison as a result. But before we get to all of that, we are going to have a great conversation about the big news story of the week. Amanda Bynes, her Twitter feed. I'm just kidding. Of course, we're going to talk about Edward Snowden and the NSA leak. It's been making headlines, and it's something that's very important to talk about. But before we get to all of that, let's meet John Idarola. He is the host of TYT University and one of the rising stars here at TYT Network, although some might argue about that. I'm just kidding, that. John. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you to whoever scripted that line about the rising star thing for you. Thank you.
All right. Sarah Benincasa is a comedian and the author of Agora Fabulous, a book you should all go out and buy right now. And Alyona Minkovski is a writer, producer, and host at HuffPostLive and a favorite among us here at TYT.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, ladies. Now, let's get right to the big news story of the day, and that is the story of Edward Snowden and his leak. Let's take a quick look at the video.
One of the extraordinary parts about this episode is that usually whistleblowers do what they do anonymously and take steps to remain anonymous for as long as they can, which they hope often is forever. You, on the other hand, have decided to do the opposite, which is to declare yourself openly as the person behind these disclosures. Why did you choose to do that?
I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government. But I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong.
Now, it's no secret that the government has been spying on us. This was a big deal during the Bush administration when these warrantless wiretaps were occurring among our soldiers. These wiretaps were supposed to keep us safe, but in fact, they were just listening in on soldiers having phone sex. So this has been a big story for quite a while. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that we did not know about the PRISM program, which is what Edward Snowden did reveal. And another thing to keep in mind is he was living a very, very cushy lifestyle in Hawaii with a beautiful girlfriend. He was making a significant amount of money, around $200,000. But he did this because he felt that he needed to protect our constitutional rights. Instead of talking about whether or not this NSA scandal is a scandal, whether or not spying on us is a big deal, now we're having these ridiculous conversations about whether or not he's a traitor or a hero. So what I do want to focus on in this segment is whether or not we're going to stand by and let the government continue doing what they're doing with violating our privacy. And Alyona, I want to bring you in to discuss this a little bit. I mean, where is the balance between protecting Americans and national security and then just violating our Fourth Amendment rights?
Well, I think that we've completely lost that balance, unfortunately. And what the government has done post 9/11 is really just play upon people's fears to systemically erode our civil liberties. We have a constitution, we have these protections that are there for a reason, and people have unfortunately been willing to give them up in a certain sense. We know that Congress has been voting on the Patriot Act. We know that they've been reauthorizing them. Maybe they didn't know the extent of it, because this program was so secretive, but you just have to, step back and realize that argument that I don't really care if the government's spying on me because I have nothing to hide. That's not what the country is about. regardless, right? We have protections for a reason. We have protections just think about journalists whose sources are being perhaps violated here, right? Or being spied upon. If nothing is secret anymore, then then how do you know what your government is doing? That's not a democracy, and I think it's a very scary element that excuse me, that we're living in right now. And so I just don't trust the government. Call me a cynic, but if your chance of being killed in a terrorist attack is something like 1 in 35 million, then I don't believe that dragnet surveillance is the right way to go about that. And I don't necessarily think the government is keeping me safer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few years ago when I was a guest on your show, we were talking about Obama, signing the Patriot Act for, I don't even know which time it was. I mean, he's done it so many times at this point. And it wasn't a story. No one was talking about it. And people don't understand that, these policies that we have in place aren't necessarily keeping us safe, right? I mean, think about it, John. We have had some bombings recently, and if the government is collecting so much information on us and so much data, wouldn't they be able to predict that something like the Boston bombing would happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the people in the intelligence community would probably respond by saying that, yeah, we now have the capacity to accumulate this massive amount of information, but we don't have the manpower or, I suppose, the artificial intelligence or algorithms to actually parse all of that information and get some information out of it. So I think that they would probably say that the purpose of the database is not to head off all acts of violence or terrorism, but once we have an idea of someone we want to investigate, we now have the capacity to do more investigation into who they've been communicating with and stuff like that. That's just playing devil's advocate. I don't support the collection of this indiscriminate amount of information. I agree with much of what you said. I think that one of the things that bothers me the most about the American public when it comes to politics is how incapacitated by fear they are of things they should not fear. As you point out, you have something like a 1 in 35 million chance of being killed in terrorism. You have a greater chance of dying in a given year by falling off of your ladder. But people, they don't know the statistics. They don't know that, the speeds we drive at on highways lead to more deaths. The additives we put in our foods lead to more deaths. But they're not worried about those things. They're worried about the bombing in Boston that killed less people than the shooting in Santa Monica last week. They just don't know how to compare those threats, and that's why you see people saying 56% are in support of the wiretapping. And I think it's kind of unfortunate.
I think you have to ask why it is that people don't know how to necessarily compare those threats, though. I mean, there's an emotional aspect to it, right?
Yes.
And who is it that's playing upon the public's fears? It's the government. And it's the media. I think the media is also highly responsible here. But we've seen time and time again government officials use a certain amount of spin to support these policies. And they say that this is necessary for our counterterrorism operations, necessary to keep America safe. And then the way that you see the media react is they're fed talking points from the government. It's like they're spoon-fed all these talking points, and then they just repeat them verbatim. And even in the attacks that we've seen against Edward Snowden this week, by the Richard Cohens that want to call him a cross-dressing Little Red Riding Hood, and Jeffrey Toobin that called him a grandiose narcissist. The media is essentially calling for this man's prosecution, execution, whatever. They've already decided to vilify him because how dare he question the government, which now your lapdog media, as I like to call them, is subservient to. And so that's what people see when they turn on the TV.
And the thing that drives me crazy, just let me chime in very quickly, is the fact that for a very long time we've been having this ridiculous discussion about our Second Amendment rights. People don't even want to restrict assault weapons, for instance, because they feel that it's protected under the Constitution. But as you mentioned earlier, John, polls indicate that the majority of Americans are actually comfortable with the government collecting all this information on us, which in my opinion, and not just my opinion, but constitutional law professors would argue, that violates our Fourth Amendment rights. So why is it that we're so willing to just give up that part of the Constitution, but when it comes to something like guns, everyone's willing to fight?
Well, that one's ranked higher. That's second.
Well, that one also has, weapons manufacturers lobbying behind it, which of course is a big part of it. But Sarah, I want to bring you in.
I have to say that I am one of the dummies that supports data collection, and I think it's fine. At the same time, I'm a big fan of Edward Snowden, who I call Fast Eddie Snowballs, because which I really want to get trending, so I'm trying to get it started here, and then I'll move to Twitter. To me, I think what he did was fine. I think it's great. I'm glad to have the information that everyone else has my information. But I don't see him as either a hero or a traitor. I see him as someone who revealed information that's useful to me, yet I find it inoffensive. My opinion is sort of, well, if I'm not up to shenanigans, then it's fine. I mean, you're reading my sex to my long-term boyfriend who I'm going to marry. That's fine. I'm not concerned about that.
So I actually love that you brought that up, because that's an argument that a lot of Americans will make. Well, we don't have anything to hide, so who cares? But the fact of the matter is, everyone has something that's embarrassing, right? And right now we're in this like weird state of complacency where we let the government do whatever we want. What if people want to take to the streets and they want to be activists, political activists like Occupy protesters? If the government has all this information on us, and by the way, private contractors have all this information on us, they can use that dirty laundry to intimidate us so we don't actually take to the streets or stir the pot. So that could be a problem.
Right, I understand as a good left-wing bedwetting liberal, I understand that I am on the wrong side of this issue, and I cannot explain what it is, and maybe you guys can psychoanalyze it, what it is about me and many Americans, like you said, 56%, who are just kind of like, nah, that's fine, nah, whatever. Yeah. What is it? Why is it that we're so complacent? What is it in the culture that makes us that way?
Well, I would say I think that one of the reasons that these polls show more support, partially it's because of Obama versus Bush. I think that people trust him in some way more. But I think that it's more that in the time between when we had President Bush and now we have President Barack Obama, we are so much more used to willingly sharing all sorts of information in many different formats across the internet. And so I think that gives people the feeling that, well, I'm sharing stuff, so I guess it's okay. But the problem is that they seem to be missing that despite the fact that they're willing to Snapchat and Instagram and tweet and all that, every single action of that is voluntary. And I think that while we might maybe trust the government bureaucrat to not go into this information, we might even trust maybe the defense contractors to not use the information maliciously. Since January 1st, how many times have we seen that the Chinese military has hacked into the servers in America? I don't want my naked photos being leaked to America because of some soldier in the Chinese army.
Who the hell trusts the private contractors? Like, I know that you don't. You're just playing devil's advocate. I mean, there are 1.4 million people in the United States that have access to this top secret information. I don't trust all those people. I don't know all those people.
You shouldn't trust all those people, but neither should the U.S. government. When they're talking about how this is a massive violation when it comes to our national security interests. Multinational corporations like defense contractors, they don't have any allegiance to the United States. Please, they work with anybody out there. And so if you are operating under this assumption that they are going to keep American secrets safe, then I think that is a false assumption to make, and that's a stupid place to start from already. But it's interesting because you say that Americans are voluntarily giving up all this information to private companies. Yes and no, right? There's always some kind of faux outrage when you find out that Facebook has been passing on more of your information to advertisers and third parties than we were aware of. But you're kind of, so a lot of the time it's stuff because nobody reads the fine print. You don't read the terms and conditions, and so it ends up getting passed on. But you're thinking, it's okay because it's still just advertisers, and who cares if next time I Google something, Target is going to know what I might want to buy. But it becomes very, very different and very dangerous, I think, when it's the government that has this information because we don't know what they're going to do with it. And so somewhere down the line, at some point, you might get in trouble, or they might try to intimidate you. They might try to completely ruin and demolish your character in the public eye or in a court of law based on something that you assumed was private.
I mean, look at what happened with Eliot Spitzer. I know that case is a little different, but they didn't like the fact that Eliot Spitzer was getting involved with the banks, holding people accountable in Wall Street, and as a result, they used something salacious and dirty to oust him out of office. So that's the kind of stuff that I really worry about because I do want political activism in the country, and I feel like if the government and private contractors have this information on people, they could easily use it to intimidate political activism or political activists.
That's almost exactly the angle I was going to take on this. So people, I think the instinctive angle to take on this, or the first reaction people have is, what could be done to me? But I know I personally have little to worry about of my past being revealed. You have to have had sex for it to be used against you. But at the same time, what if there's a politician in 5 years that like John Edwards, before it turned out that John Edwards was the worst man in America, who's saying all the right things and you want him to become president, and then he's sunk because he went to a prostitute at some point. Maybe there's no information of mine that can be used to hurt me, but there's information about other people that can be used to hurt them, which will then hurt me.
Right.
So it's not just about the individual.
But even as somebody who works in the media, I mean, the amount of things that I have Googled and the amount of websites that I've been on, jihadi websites that I've been on
Right,
as
for
part
research,
of
yeah.
research, you know, which is just part of your job as a journalist. But that's the honest truth, right? Is in some way they might try to use that against you later. This is why you have people, you know, like Chris Hedges that is leading the charge against the government in a legal battle against the NDAA, because then what is something that is counted as associating with, you know, associated forces of Al-Qaeda and terrorism if this is just somebody that you were interviewing or interacting with in some way? We know that the government likes to twist and turn and blur the law, and we've seen them go after activists, after other whistleblowers. We've seen them try to go after journalists. You have Representative Peter King today saying that the journalists that published all this NSA stuff, like Glenn Greenwald, should be prosecuted.
Yep.
And so this is why it should worry you.
It's unbelievable. And by the way, like, that just reminds me of the Point episode we did on porn. I did a ton of research for that. Hentai porn. I mean, who knows how that would be used against me. But last question goes to Sarah. What would you like to see done to Edward Snowden? I mean, some people are calling him or accusing him of treason, which of course is punishable by death.
Right.
So what do you think is going to happen to him, and what would you like to see happen to him?
In my dream world, nothing bad would happen to him. He lost his job. I think that's fair. He violated the terms of his agreement with his employer. I think that's perfectly fine. If I had money to hire someone, I would hire him to be my sidekick and we would solve crimes together. As for what should actually happen to him, you know, I would hope that he gets off with a relatively light sentence. I don't think that's going to happen, though, if we look at what happened to Manning.
Exactly. All right. Well, we'll keep you guys posted on that story, but we got to take a quick break. Let's do that. And when we come back, more fun stuff, including partisan politics and how we're so willing to support our side regardless of what they do. Welcome back to The Point. There's a really important question that we really need to focus on. Are you willing to support policy or politics, politicians or positions? And that's something that's really coming up now because of the NSA leak. Let's take a look at what Chevy Chase had to say back when Barack Obama promised to close Gitmo, but then didn't.
I wonder if you have an opinion about Barack Obama saying he was going to close down Gitmo, but not closing it. What do you think about that?
You know, it's funny because what I like about Barack Obama is that he chooses his priorities as he learns more. So, you know, I mean, here's a guy who's really young, feeling his way along. I voted for him. I very much like him, but I do feel that he's a young man, and that therefore he has to, in a way, feel his way along. There might have been a president who's 67 like me, who already knew exactly how he felt. So I don't hold it against him at all.
So as the co-host of the Young Turks, I could say that back in 2008, we were very supportive of the Obama administration, or Obama running for president. We wanted him to get elected. And then when he did get elected, he decided to not follow through with anything he had in his platform, except for gay rights, kind of. So that was a little bit of a problem. He tried to pass health care reform, but of course, he didn't come out as aggressively as we would have liked. But when it came to civil liberties, he's just as bad, if not worse, than Bush. So we've been very, very critical of that, and we've gotten a lot of heat from our Democratic audience as a result of that, which shows us that a lot of people are supportive of their party, not necessarily policies. And I want to give you guys some facts to really back that up. So because of this NSA surveillance leak, there have been polls indicating that the majority of Americans are actually okay with it. But when you look at specific parties, you see this partisan shift. So back in 2006, when it came to NSA surveillance programs, Republicans, 75% of them said it was acceptable, 23% said unacceptable. When it came to Democrats, 37% said acceptable, 61% said unacceptable. Now fast forward to June of 2013 and those numbers shift. You see that Republicans say that it's unacceptable, 52% as opposed to 47%, and with Democrats, 64% think that it's acceptable. I mean, it's amazing. It's the same freaking issue. So why is there a shift? Why do you see that? And John, this question goes to you. I mean, do we really care about policy here, or is it about rooting for our team?
Yeah, well, look, so I will say historically, like back when I was working on my doctorate, this is one of the areas I thought, you know, this seems really interesting. I want to work on it. So I had to do a content analysis of previous studies, and it turns out there's almost nothing that's been studied more in political science. Like there's a long history of this being true. But I would say I don't think that it's necessarily entirely irrational to support a policy under one party rather than another. I mean, there is some influence of the person who's managing the policy. Like, the same information could be used one way under a Republican administration and another under Democratic administration. Your view of whether or not it should be permissible or not should be in part dependent upon who's doing it.
You really feel that the Obama administration would use this information differently than the Bush administration?
Yeah, almost certainly. I don't think that it should exist under either administration, but I think that almost certainly the sorts of people that Obama would put in positions of power over this over this information would be different under both, I think.
But Obama has been
better, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I think less likely to use it for subversive political
not to
reasons.
insult you. I think that that's actually very naive. Especially when you consider the fact that Obama has been very supportive and has been in bed with many corporations. So when we really think about the information that's being collected, as we mentioned in previous points in the previous video, we're worried that this information can be used against people who want to be politically active. If Obama is getting funded by these corporations, wouldn't Obama be in favor of using this information to intimidate political activists?
I think that you can speculate, but I think that before you can say that that's true, you'd have to have some evidence for it. I think that it's very easy to say, look, we don't like what Obama's doing and he's a Democrat, we didn't like what Bush was doing, he's a Republican, so they're the same. But I think I think if anything, that's kind of naive.
But we do have evidence. We have the Occupy protesters. I mean, the Obama administration aggressively went after Twitter to get private information on these Occupy protesters, and that is a form of intimidation. So I don't think that the Obama administration would be any better than the Bush administration.
I think that you're totally valid to undercut what I was saying. Understand that I was to some extent playing devil's advocate in saying that it's not entirely, I said 100% irrational to care about who the politician is. But I think that the larger reason that you see this, not just in this issue, but in many issues, people frequently change their positions when a new president gets elected, or say that they support it because it's now my team as opposed to the other team. And the problem is that partially it's an artifact of the fact that we have a two-party political system. Like, if Obama doesn't follow through on his platform, do I vote for McCain next time? No, probably not, because it's just that's farther away from my policy preferences. So I think that people are somewhat constrained by the American political system, I think.
I definitely agree with
that. But
that.
also really fast, and I'm sorry that I'm going on here.
Yeah,
when you say
go after the show, it's
okay, no problem. When you say, should I stop supporting a politician, supporting does not mean one thing. It means many things. Does it mean, should I not vote for him next time? Should I not donate money to his campaign or the campaigns of Democrats? Should I not boost him when I'm talking to friends and say, oh, he's great?
Yeah.
Like, all of these different things need to be managed.
So the support that I'm specifically referring to in this segment, for the sake of this conversation, is people who get butthurt if you criticize the Obama administration for carrying out policies that were very similar to the Bush administration. So people who don't want to hold Obama accountable, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, all of these politicians and pundits that go on the media, and they basically make the argument that, oh, it's fine, they're not doing anything illegal here.
It's not just them. How about MSNBC, the entire channel, almost?
Exactly.
I mean, there are definitely some people there that I very much respect, but a lot of the pundits there do say the exact same thing. The problem with the Obama administration, I mean, I think there are obviously multiple problems here, but there does tend to be this kind of worship of a personality, and so Obama is worshipped, and even the way that he's, again, been portrayed in the media, and something that they've tried to do, when you go back to some of the New York Times reporting on the kill list, is that, he likes to, all of this weighs on his shoulders and weighs very heavily on him, and so he likes to make the decision himself as to whether or not someone is going to be executed, and so you kind of, it's this false sense of, well, he's a moral good guy, and so I think it's okay if he carries it out. Which that's problematic because it's setting a very dangerous precedent, because what happens when these powers are in someone else's hands? And what the Obama administration just tried to do is they have continued many of the Bush policies, but they've expanded many of the Bush policies, and they've codified them, right? They've turned them into law. And so if you listen to Obama's very weak, and I think very weak defense because he knows that it's indefensible when it comes to the NSA surveillance, it's that, well, don't worry, all of this is looked at through the FISA courts, and it's approved by law, and so you look at the recent extensions to the Patriot Act. Well, guess what? The FISA courts have approved all but 11 out of like 34,000 requests, of this sort in the 30-some years that FISA court has been around. But so it's, if Obama gives you the perception that now it's legal, then people think that it's okay. But we know that there is rampant abuse. We see this constantly. We see that everyone lies about it, just like Clapper, the director of national intelligence. Everyone's now playing that soundbite of when Ron Wyden called him out and said, do you spy on Americans? He said no in congressional testimony. Now he's walking it back. I don't even remember what his defense was there.
He didn't even say no. He did this. He's like, well, no.
And now he's saying it's the least untruthful.
No. Come
or
on.
the least untruthful thing he could have said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just find it really pathetic and scary that people are so okay with these policies when it's the Obama administration that's doing it. And I'm incredibly disappointed with this president. I voted for him the first time around, and I couldn't bring myself to do that again this last election because of how much he's walked back on all of this. And you look at some of these videos of Senator Obama, the one that was campaigning to be president, and what he's been saying versus what he says now, and it's just a complete flip-flop. And it's scary, but I think you hit on something in the sense that, only having two choices is that's not a good option for the American people. We need more choices.
We definitely do need a third-party option. And it's really difficult because, so far the libertarian movement has gained a little bit of momentum, but just based on how they did in the last election, it's hard to believe that we would ever have a third-party system, but I would love it. Sarah, I want to bring you into the conversation. How did you feel when Bush was doing this type of surveillance versus how you feel now? Do you see a shift?
Oh, I thought it was awful. But, I'm a big fan of Barry O, so I think it's fine. You notice that I have been glamored by him, and I think a lot of people have. I think I again, represent the sort of folks who are blindly obedient, and I think that's really dangerous. This is making me investigate myself personally, so thank you. But I think that politics is the sport that unites us all. Jocks and nerds can both get into politics. And there is this feeling, and you spoke about that sort of team mentality that, my team is winning, I'm on my team's side. It trumps rationale, it trumps logic, that emotional connection to winning and being in charge and being on top. For a lot of very intelligent people, myself included, oftentimes trumps reason. And the Obama administration is incredible at manipulating emotions. They are amazing at it. They're wonderful. The campaign was great at it. The administration's great at it.
And I think that this is also an example of, psychology and political science teaming up. Because if you ask me, and this is my pop psychology, I don't know if this is real, but I would make the hypothesis that, you support and you campaign for a particular politician and you want to believe in him. And then when he proves you wrong, you want to find a way to rationalize the reason. Like, what is the reasoning for it? Why did you decide to support that person? And you come up with, excuses in your own head.
You emotionally invested in him,
exactly.
And you put yourself out there, and you argued with your, racist cousin at Thanksgiving dinner about it. So now you must be right about everything.
Right.
And so must Obama.
No one wants to admit that they're wrong.
It's very disappointing. But the other thing is, sure, there's such a thing as a team mentality, and I think that there's a lot that you can look to, a lot of policies when it comes to the economy, right? When it comes to certain social policies, where you can focus more on the team. You can focus more on what Democratic Party priorities are, and if they want to raise taxes and what programs they're okay with cutting. If we're going to go ahead and say that deficit reduction is for some reason a priority in this country, and that we should follow, a path of austerity, or when it comes to women's rights. I mean, immigration reform. There are a lot of policies out there where it takes the entire party uniting. But specifically in this area, why I think it's so scary and so damaging, what President Obama's done is because foreign policy, counterterrorism, this is the one area where the executive branch pretty much does get to act separately from Congress, right? There isn't a whole lot of oversight there, and we know that this administration has done that even more, that they've created this entire secretive little bubble and circle within the White House where they get to do whatever they want. And so this is all him. Obama can't blame this on anybody else. This is this man totally flip-flopping on what he said.
All right, I'm going to let Alyona have the last word on that. And now we're going to move on to Anonymous. Anonymous played a critical role in the leaks involved in the Steubenville, Ohio case. Now, for those of you who don't have a lot of information on that particular story, we do have a video. Let's take a quick look at that, and I'll give you more context.
A 26-year-old Kentucky man has revealed that his home was the subject of an aggressive raid by a group of FBI agents just last month. This is in connection with the anonymous hack that helped publicize key social media events in the Steubenville rape case. His name is Derek Lawstutter, also known by his screen name KY Anonymous, and he told the Huffington Post over the phone that on April 15th, FBI agents raided the Winchester, Kentucky house he shares with his girlfriend and his brother. He said he was told he could face jail time if he let the story get out.
Now, just to give you guys some more information on this case, Lawstutter hacked into the website Roll Red Roll and the webmaster's email account, and he did leak some personal emails that webmaster was sending out. And it was important in terms of prosecuting the two rapists in this case. The part of this story that's particularly egregious is this anonymous member is facing 10 years in prison because of what he did, but the two rapists in this case have already been sentenced to 1 and 2 years in a youth facility. So, I mean, is justice really served here? I don't know. Let's bring in Sarah so you can share what you think.
You know, I am deeply uncomfortable with the idea that Lawstutter would have to face more time than these two jackass kids in Steubenville. At the same time, I also worry about vigilante justice. I worry about what happens when we take the law into our own hands. Sometimes great things happen. I think this was a good outcome, right? But what if these young men had been unfairly maligned? What if in another world, you know, they hadn't done it, and yet there had been arrows pointing to yes when in fact the answer was no? I know it sounds like I'm hedging, which I am. This is a very much a non-answer, but I like what Anonymous does, but at the same time it makes me a bit nervous because although they seem to be on the side of good, what happens when somebody in that organization flips and makes the wrong decision? What happens when they go after and vilify the wrong person?
The same thing about the government and all the surveillance that they capture on people.
No, I actually don't think that was a non-answer. I think that was an appropriate answer because I think the issue is much more complex than, it's not black and white. You can't either say like, I'm 100% supportive because you know that there could be an abuse of power. And this is an example of them using vigilante justice in a good way. But I do worry about someone who goes rogue and, you know, hacks into, I don't know, someone else's, like some, you know, innocent person's email and outs them for something that, you know, might be salacious.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm reminded of back in, I think it was '96, the Olympic bombing, right? When everybody went after this guy, Richard Jewell, who was a security guard, and everybody was so sure that this was the guy, and people were going through his garbage and going through his mail and also putting this guy through hell. And it turns out, of course, you know, it wasn't his fault. He wasn't at fault. That made a deep impression on me because of just the shame and the fear that as a society we brought into this man's life, and I worry that could happen with Anonymous, that they could make a wrong move, that they could, you know, point the finger at the wrong guy, and something like that could happen again.
Of course they could make the wrong move. I mean, I think that those are all fair questions to ask, but, and by the way, I mean, from what I understand, Lawstutter hasn't actually been charged yet, right? These are things that he might possibly face, but I think that raises a lot of questions about our priorities, especially within our justice system. We know that this Justice Department has pursued those that have, you know, violated certain computer laws that are on the books. They've pursued them very aggressively. And you look at Aaron Swartz, right, and what they did with him. And so that to me is the danger. With Lawstutter's case, he hasn't actually been charged yet. We don't know if that's happening. Sure, you can say that these two kids were juveniles, which is why they only received 1 and 2 year sentences. There's a lot of nuance to this particular story with the Steubenville rape case, but you know, but as we go forward, I think that we're obviously going to see a lot more people that are hackers. We're going to see a lot more people breaking some of these computer laws. And so how is our Justice Department going to approach that? Is Congress going to update some of these laws that have been on the books since 1984? Right? And you think of the advances in technology that have been made with the, if I'm talking about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in particular. So those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. But it's also interesting because public opinion can be very split on something like this, right?
Definitely.
Rape is indefensible, so people are supporting what Lawstutter did. But is that always going to be the case?
And another point that I'd like to make is a lot of times people think of Anonymous as a group of people, like an organization, but it's a collective. So there are no rules. Like, it's not like people get together and they're like, okay, here are the ground rules. Okay, we don't hack into the accounts of these people and we don't do No, it's just a loose collective of individuals who want to fight any sort of injustice that they see in the country. But there's really no way of figuring out what their morality is.
And there's no accountability. They don't have voters and they don't have shareholders. Now, I would like to say I absolutely love them. I don't want them to take down my website.
I mean, I've
I'm
been
very
supportive of them
worried
too,
about
but
what we've been doing here because
Yeah.
I think that the point is going to be taken off the face of the internet. But no, I think. So the big fear, obviously, and I've felt this fear because up until this point, I don't know that I've seen Anonymous do something that I didn't agree with, but inevitably it's going to happen. Now, when they make their misstep or they get some information on someone, it turns out that they were innocent. Theoretically, that should not be a problem because the media and reporters should do the necessary investigations to determine if it's true before they trumpet it on both mainstream news and also on the internet. But the problem is that we don't have a responsible media that'll do that. They want to beat BuzzFeed. They wanted to get out as fast as possible. And so when Anonymous does make a misstep, when they do frame someone who's innocent, inevitably, because there's no accountability, I fear that it will do a lot of damage because we don't have the media we need to check Anonymous's power.
All right, we're unfortunately out of time. We got to take another quick break, so let's go ahead and do that. And when we come back, public shaming. If someone's caught cheating, should we air their dirty laundry? Welcome back to The Point. With social media, publicly shaming people has now become a thing. And a recent story came out where a woman riding on a Philadelphia train caught these two guys talking about how they were cheating on their wives. And she claims that they were talking about it for like 2.5 hours. And she got so tired of it that she decided to take a photo of them. And then she posted it on Facebook and encouraged other people to spread the photo so it goes viral. And there was also another story where different websites like Gawker will look up racist tweets and they'll publish them and shame those individuals. So this whole question is coming up about whether or not it's okay. And Alyona, I want to start off with you. What was your first reaction to the Facebook picture that was posted?
Oh, this one is very tricky. It's a very tricky game because part of me wants to say, mind your own business. You know, what do you care? So sure, the government if you see something, say something campaign is working on you, but now it's veering into other people's personal lives. At the same time, you know, these guys, you know, probably should be willing to take responsibility for their actions. If they, you know, if you're getting engaged in something like that, then you have to know that maybe at some point it'll come back to bite you, and that's just called being an adult, is being responsible. But I think that it's dangerous because, you know, overall, I actually like public shaming, but then the type of but the type of responses that you see online, you know, can lead to things like death threats, and people can become very crazy. And so I don't know. I really don't have a good answer for this one because it's a very weird balance to try to strike.
I remember back in the day where it was like bad to eavesdrop on people. No, I totally understand that these two douchebags are like on the train and they're talking about how they're cheating and it could annoy someone. But my reaction would be amusement as opposed to I'm going to take a picture and I'm going to ruin this guy's life. It's none of my freaking business.
Oh, see, you're not a Redditor. You don't want karma. You don't want those upvotes. Okay, that's what drives people to do this. I'm even more in support, I think, of public shaming than you are. I think that in the modern day, it is too easy to be a dick. I think there's not enough accountability on dicks. I think that you can, look, if you're cheating on your wife and you're bragging about it in public,
you're
on public
a bad
transportation.
Person. I get it. I get that you're
totally,
a bad person,
and you should be punished. But also, we're really fast before you get in there. One thing that bothers me is when I say something on the internet, now thanks to TYT, it goes out there and I can be held accountable, but people make comments on forums and stuff like that. They can say whatever they want, they can troll, and there's no way to trace it back to them. I look forward to a day on the internet where people are actually held accountable for the things they say, and that's why I support the publishing the tweets, especially because that's public and they knew what they were doing when they tweeted it.
John, are those comments bothering you?
No. I'm actually, thankfully, people are much nicer than me, mostly because I'm a white male, so they're super easy on me on the internet. But yeah, if you're tweeting racist stuff, that should be used against you.
Well, let me just clarify one thing, though. You know, when I say that I am for public shaming, I'm for public shaming, you know, in particular, if, let's say you're a family values politician that is choosing to moralize and legislate in a way where you're judging others, and then it turns out that you're having an affair or something, or you force someone to have an abortion, meanwhile you're telling other women that they're not allowed to make a choice when it comes to their reproductive rights. Or, you know, public shaming Wall Street bankers. You know, I think the public shaming works if it's actually holding somebody accountable. When it's just, you know,
someone's personal life
that doesn't affect you at all, what do you really care? care.
I agree with you. Again, this is another issue that is not black and white. There's certain gradation. So in terms of the idiots who write racist things on Twitter, I think that there's a lesson to be learned from that, because we're under this like stupid misconception that we've, figured racism out and everything is fine, and we have like specific examples of how racism still exists. So I like that type of public shaming. But when it comes to like some, unidentifiable, anonymous dude who's cheating on his wife, yes, it's salacious. Yes, we all want to hear about it because we like the drama. But I don't want to get involved in that guy's life. I want him and his wife to figure it out for themselves, and that's it. I mean, maybe I'm a bad person for not wanting to support his wife and making sure that she knows.
Well, your personal life is your personal life.
Yeah.
No one knows what goes on in two people's relationship but the two people in that relationship. So we have no idea what the dynamics are.
Well, the NSA knows.
Right, the NSA completely knows. Absolutely.
NSA, yeah.
I mean, it's not up to us to play, judge and jury about a relationship we know nothing about. And I think it wasn't up to this woman. I think what she did was incredibly rude and was an invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
I would say I think that it's totally true. Like if it's your private life, I get that. But when you're bragging about it in public and trying to look cool, I think you need to be knocked down a couple pegs.
You were bragging about it on a train, big whoop.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, though, if you want to bring up the racist tweets, where that becomes an issue is a lot of these people that were making those tweets are in high school, right? Yes. They're teenagers. And so this is a whole different element of life that our society is now trying to grapple with, because as a teenager who doesn't make dumb mistakes, and probably do things and say things that they later on regret in life, and we've all had to learn hard lessons at a certain point. And so I think that these kids need to learn a lesson. They need to be told that this isn't okay. And but is having to do that on the internet the best way? Like I said, then you have a very negative reaction on the other side, to where other people that are anonymous on the internet can send you death threats, and it's I think it's a particularly difficult world to try to live in and navigate as a teenager these
I think
days.
that as part of middle school and high school curriculum, they should include a course on social media and what the implications will be if you're like oversharing on social media.
But who's going to teach it? Your old teacher that doesn't even know?
Exactly. Which is why we need like young, enthusiastic teachers, but that's a whole nother story. But I think it's important to make these kids aware that like, hey, if you're going to sext, for instance, that will exist for the rest of your life. It will end up on the internet, and your parents will see it.
Yeah,
and they'll try to criminalize it. So watch out.
Exactly.
Back in the day, when you were learning to write, one of the things you were taught to write was how to write a letter. Okay, so you were taught how to communicate in that way.
Yeah.
Update it. Teach them how to send a tweet.
Totally agree.
Great idea. I used to be a high school teacher, believe it or not, and I think that is a brilliant idea. I think that we need to create funding specifically to teach the children how to use the Twitters. I write for Jezebel, and I believe it was Jezebel that did a story, sort of publicly outing and shaming these kids who had written these. It was Jezebel or Gawker, right?
Oh, you know what? It might have been Jezebel. Yeah. I apologize. It was Jezebel.
No, it's all part of the Gawker family.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it disturbed me, because having worked with adolescents, I know how fluid they are and how malleable they are, and what a kid writes one day may not be what he or she believes the next day. And a lot of these kids are going to evolve and change as they have more life experiences. So I actually felt kind of bad for these kids. I don't feel bad for them if they're harassing someone online, but I feel kind of bad for them if they express a stupid opinion and then get pilloried for it, and they're 15 years old.
All right.
Now, what's really ironic, of course, is they say the stupid thing on Twitter, and their entire life is destroyed afterward. Amanda Bynes says crazy things on Twitter, and she becomes rich and famous.
She's a hero. Right?
She does.
No, but the thing is,
she's pretty funny though.
But these kids shouldn't be. I mean, you shouldn't be kicked out of school, or we have to look at the kind of punishment that actually comes down on them. Maybe they need a talking to. From their parents or from their teacher or their school administrator or something like that. But are you going to punish them in such a way to where that actually affects their school record and their education?
Considering the current climate, we'll just send them to prison. That's how we work.
A private prison.
All right, so let's move on to Jeremy Irons. He is an actor who has been doing these interviews where he keeps getting himself into trouble. In the past, he compared homosexuality to bestiality, or that it would lead to it. So people were criticizing him for that. But now he decided to talk about rape, and he is getting heat for it, and he should get heat for it. So apparently he was asked about Jimmy Savile, who was a British TV presenter. He was accused of rape, and he abused as many as 450 female and male victims, some as young as 8 years old, over a 40-year span. And right now there's a lot of talk about accountability for rape in the UK. And for some reason or another, during an interview, Jeremy Irons felt that he needed to share his empathy for these sexual abusers. He said the following: there is a blanket term for child abuse, and if the worst thing you have done was put your hand on someone's thigh under their skirt, that may be sexual abuse, but it's not like buggering a 9-year-old boy. All right, so that's interesting. And here he said the following: I remember when my son was 12 and he was like a god. He just went through that sort of golden time for about 18 months. I don't have a daughter, but they do the same. So he's basically arguing that in this case where the TV presenter raped these young kids, the kids wanted it because they're going through this sexual revolution and they just can't help themselves. They're hanging out on set. So what's amazing to me is that he would even have the balls to say something this idiotic in public. And I mean, first question goes to Alyona. I mean, what do you think? Yeah.
Make me take this one, huh?
Yeah, I know. It's a tough situation.
Well, and prior to that, he was on HuffPostLive, I think, talking to my colleague Josh Zepps, where he made this whole, gay marriage will lead to incest type of argument. So, I mean, if you agree to do an interview and, you're going to publicly air your thoughts, then, this is what he thinks, and so expect the blowback and people's responses to it. No one's saying that he isn't allowed to share his opinion, but I think it's a disgusting opinion. I mean, what are you even getting to when he was talking about, is he saying that it's worse to abuse young boys than it is to sexually abuse young women?
Can I defend him? In this
No,
case?
hold on. Before you get to that, I actually want to go to Sarah, because I'm curious what Sarah thinks about the fact that he's an actor. Like, do you think that he should get, some sort of a pass because he's an actor and not like a political pundit or something like that?
No, I think he should be ignored. I think that he's an idiot, as a lot of entertainers are. I am a comedian, and anything I say on this program shouldn't be taken seriously at all. It's like how Jon Stewart will try to dodge and hide behind that, like, I'm a comedian, not a journalist. I think that Jeremy Irons has responsibility for what he said. Does it affect us as a society? No. Should we really care too much about what he has to say? No. Why? Because he is dumb and he played Scar in The Lion King. And he is not that big of a problem. If I see him on the street, will I call him a D-bag? Possibly. But, his stupid opinions about things don't really affect my life. As long as he's not acting out on any of these ideas and actually harming anyone, that's fine.
But do you guys feel like his commentary, I guess, pushes like a rape culture? And I'm curious what you guys think about that, because if he's saying like, oh well, the victims in this case were asking for it, they were hanging out on set, which by the way he said during the interview. Don't you think that that's basically giving a pass for rapists?
Yeah, look, I think that he probably does, but like he believes in that sort of culture, or he thinks it's okay in the way that you're saying. But I think that we shouldn't worry about it contributing in a larger sense to it, because I don't think he has any influence on any culture, rape culture, popular culture, anything like that. But to go back to what I was going to say to you, I want to defend the one tweet. And understand, I'm not defending everything he said. I think that he is wrong and he is incredibly backwards and everything. But when he was giving the example of the hand under the skirt on the thigh as opposed to buggering the 9-year-old, I don't think, and I think Jezebel got this wrong. I think it was Jezebel. It might have been Slate or Salon. I don't think he's saying it's better to abuse a female than a male. I think he's saying their sexual assault is a blanket term that encapsulates touching someone and anally raping someone. And I think that that's an argument that many times we've made on the Young Turks, that you can be put on the sexual offender registry list because you got drunk and went outside your house naked and someone saw you, or you raped someone.
Or you peed in public.
Exactly, and we put both those people on the same list. And so maybe that's not the point he's making, but that's the only good thing that can come up from
found
it.
a better way to make that point, because that's very true, right? You flash someone once, and then now unfortunately you're considered a sexual predator for the rest of your life. But it's like putting your hand underneath a young girl's skirt when it's still not a good defense or not a good example.
It seems like he's kind of making excuses for it, like, oh, it makes it seem like he doesn't think it's that big of a deal, when it is a big deal, right?
He clearly doesn't think it's a big deal, and he's clearly a bad person. I have no problem saying that he sucks. But I do understand like the point in a sense that he was trying to make.
Well,
if he was trying to make
I
that
think
point.
you're right, though, that hopefully Jeremy Irons just doesn't have any influence on any kind of culture, and we can just move on.
Move on. All right. In fact, to that point, why don't we move on? Let's take another quick break, and when we come back, Off Their Feed, where we take popular tweets of the week and we judge them. Now it's time for Off Their Feed, where we will take some popular tweets of the week and we're going to respond to them. So let's start off with John Fugel saying, he tweets, "There's always the possibility that Snowden just picked a really elaborate way to break up with a girlfriend." Oh, that's an interesting thing. Snowden allegedly failed to inform his girlfriend before he left to China, never to return.
No one ever said that heroes aren't shitty boyfriends.
I mean, he could have just sent a text that the government would have read. That's a fine way to break up with someone in this day and age.
If it was all about sex, why not go to Thailand?
My tweet would be, judging by her pictures, no way. Judging by the way she poetically writes her fairy-infested blogs, maybe. All right, Alexis Madrigal of The Atlantic says, "Sales of 1984 are going wild, but that's the wrong piece of literature for framing what the NSA is doing."
Sure, you can say that it's Orwellian, you can say that it's Kafkaesque, maybe, you know, you can bring in some Hannah Arendt. I think we should be happy people are reading.
Yes, I love that point.
50 Shades of Grey. Think about it.
Why no love for a brave new world?
Thank you.
Yeah. Next, we have comedian Dana Gould, who says, "Edward Snowden is so concerned America will become an invasive police state that he's gone to live in China." Now, Snowden's move might be either ironic or extremely stupid. What do you guys think?
Maybe not the best decision, but it certainly sends a message to the U.S. government.
I think it's sort of adorable. I think China is probably not going to give him up, so I think it's a good move.
Boy George says, "Barack Obama, I'd like to access your emails. I mean, if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? LOL."
The most offensive thing about that tweet is the LOL at the end. Let's get over it. It's not 2009.
There's nothing creepier than Boy George sending you an LOL tweet.
That's the kind of public shaming I'd be into.
Oh, I would love it. I think that was the tweet of the week, my favorite tweet. The TV Guide tweets, "Melissa McCarthy was photoshopped beyond belief in UK poster for The Heat. Basically, the poster made her look like she was 40 pounds thinner than she really was." I would tweet back and say, who hires these amateur photoshoppers?
I don't know who's going to go watch The Heat based on the physical attractiveness of Melissa McCarthy.
That's a good point.
I love Melissa McCarthy, and I think she's fabulous as a big lady, and I think it's dumb. That's what I think. I think it's dumb. That's my official word on that.
Absolutely. HuffPost Politics writes, "Congrats, President Bush. Your approval rating is positive for the first time since 2005. A new Gallup poll actually puts the former president's favorable, unfavorable ratings at 49 to 46. I would basically question the methodology. Where did this poll take place? Oklahoma City."
I think people approve of the things that are no longer relevant in their lives.
I know I approve of those naked paintings that he did. Ooh!
And you can always follow me on Twitter.
All right, guys, that does it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching. We had a great time. Very great discussion. John Idarola, tell our audience where they can watch your awesome show.
Okay, youtube.com/TYT University for university news and lifestyle, and youtube.com/John Idarola for political news.
Sarah Benincasa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You can buy my book, Agorafabulous, and I'm at Sarah J. Benincasa.
Excellent. And Alyona Minkovski.
Thanks for having me on. You can see me at HuffPostLive and my Twitter handles at Alyona Mink. And in the meantime, I think that everybody should contribute to Edward Snowden's legal defense fund, and everyone go see Dirty Wars.
All right. I'm Anna Kasparian. You guys can obviously watch me on The Young Turks Monday through Friday on youtube.com/TYT Live, 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time, hoping that Jank doesn't go over my hour so you guys can get an actual hour of my program. But that's another story. You guys should definitely check it out. And thank you so much for watching The Point. Have a great week.